Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Usual the Game in Star Trek Online, and welcome to a little bonus video for Sunday. I've hit Tier 4 in the Iconian reputation track, and as is traditional at this point, let's take a look at what we've got access to. Passive abilities, 2 as per standard. First one is the Radiant Detonation Matrix. This is a passive space ability, tags onto your directed energy weapons, so your beam arrays and your cannon. And, well, you can see what it does there. 2.5% for a little bit of area of effect damage, 1400, give or take. It benefits from exotic damage boosts, bear that in mind if you're a science captain, and it strips buff. What it doesn't mention is if it strips buffs in one at a time or in massive chunks, because potentially that's an area of effect subnucleonic pulse, which could be very, very powerful. I need to get that out, thrashed around, see what it does. Cruiser captains benefiting from beam broadsides, science vessel captains likewise trying to do what they can with 3 pop guns aside. They, I think, will get the most from that. The other one is, destabilizing phase array. When you're damaged, you gain immunity for 3 seconds, but it only occurs once every 60 seconds. Problem is, it's automatic and passive. Now, yay for not having another ability on what is already a very crowded toolbar, but that is essentially 5% uptime immunity that you have no control over, and even the AI tends not to lead with big hits. So what will happen, of course, particularly in PvP, is that if someone suspects you have this, they'll lead with an opening broadside of regular fire to draw it out, and then they'll charge up the beam overload, then they'll charge up the rapid fire or the surgical strikes, and they'll just bypass you. In effect, however, it's a 5% increase in hit points, but I'm not so sure that's going to be useful. Not having control over that, to my mind, takes away a lot of the utility from it. On the gear side, things are a lot nicer. In the store, we have got the Radiant Anti-Proton Beam and Cannon weapons. Now, if you're just looking to gear up a new ship, there's one particular item in all the categories that's worth noting. You don't have triple crit D, sadly, but what you do have, if you're looking as a good base weapon, is the double crit D and single crit chance. If you're already struggling to get around about 16% crit on your builds, because basically you don't have enough Romulan officers on your bridge yet, then these weapons might well be of interest. So as you see here, you get 2% crit chance and 50 crit severity, double crit D, single crit H, as well as the Radiant weapon type, so that gives you the 2.5% proc for the 1000 temporary hit points, stacking up to 5 times. Likewise, if you're running escort over on the dual heavy cannon, again double crit D, single crit H, 60 crit severity bonus this time around. Bear in mind that dual heavy cannons do have an intrinsic bonus in and of themselves, if I remember correctly, as well as the 2% crit chance and 60% crit severity. Remember, when it comes to surgical strikes and such like, the magic number you're chasing is going to be 16% crit. In fact, that's true of most meta builds, and certainly the crit D builds these days. You need to have that 1 in 6 crit chance to really have the build shine. Of course, the more you have, the merrier, but 16%, boys and girls, that's where it starts to overtake everything else. Big style. The other shiny, well, it's the warp cores. These are these are the reason you are driving into the Iconian set, if nothing else, because the warp cores are silly. Not for their stats as such, although they're pretty impressive. Extra engine power based on singularity charge, maximum warp of 10, standard stuff. 20% extra singularity charge if you're Romy, that's worth having. 50% reduced cooldown on transwarp. Hot restart of weapons after 1 second. Given how much EMP the Iconians are throwing around, that is so handy. You also get a rapid heal at full impulse, which is good if you're jumping from engagement to engagement, but passive repairs are such that most of the time, well, frankly, you're usually fully repaired between engagements anyway. That just makes it a little more likely to happen. It's that hot restart on weapons that you really want. And of course, the hyper warp core, likewise, you have that same hot restart. You also have the equivalent engine power bonuses, so 17.5% warp core efficiency, that's definitely worth having if you're looking to boost auxiliary power on an escort or a cruiser. 7.5% engine power transferred across to shields, yay. 3% engine power, 5% maximum engine power exceeding the cap, and of course warp core hot restart on weapons. I must admit I will miss my amp effect on my current warp core. Let me just remind you what that is. That's the Elite Fleet Reinforced amp, of course. Gives you 3.3% bonus damage for every subsystem with 75 or more power. Well, even in baseline configuration, I have got 3 systems edging over that cap. Once I get into combat and the Plasmonic Leech kicks in, well, everything just goes through the roof. And then the fun really starts. That is, after all, 12, 3.3, 6.6, 13.2% extra damage to all weapons courtesy of that power leech, and of course more shield power is always good if you're in a cruiser and tanking everything that comes your way. Finally, as far as projects go, we have got the specialized weapons. Let's pull back to these. So your first option is of course the dual heavy cannon. This is your escort setup. Standard heavy cannon numbers for the most part, 657.2 damage, 438.1 DPS. The radiant proc chance is doubled up to 5% for 1010 hit points. Again, it can stack 5 times, and the real advantage is that you have got firing cycle haste for 6 seconds after this weapon. So what happens is that as long as you can keep this weapon continuously on target, it will haste potentially up to 30%. And of course, the more shots you get, the more shots you're gonna get. So 30% damage increase, that takes the beam array up to 400 DPS, plus of course whatever specials you get. Haste is nice and linear like that. And the cannons, well, that gets even more impressive, going up to 600 DPS baseline when it's fully hasted up. On the downside, you are of course trading away some crit severity. And it's a double accuracy mod as well, plus 20%, so double ac crit D. Not bad, but there's better around. It's that haste buff that really makes the difference. So that's taking a look at the gear. Certainly I will be going for the warp core. That's my next grind, I think. Might have to take some time away from reputation, as slack as I have been. And if you're looking to fit out a new starship, as I've said, consider the double crit D and crit H weapons as an early fit. They're not too shabby at all. Last but not least, of course, we have our latest message from Sailor, and needless to say, this is where the spoiler warning kicks in. So 3, 2, 1, I hope you've stopped listening by now, because here we go.
Bureaucrats, the curse of the galaxy. I have been passed from person to person, from minor official to junior attaché. All of them are officious and polite. They smile as they tell me they're so sorry, but I just need to speak to someone else. When we fought this empire decades ago, I was impressed by the strength and ferocity of their warriors. Now I am in awe at the labyrinth that keeps you from seeing their leaders. I have been an empress. I have ruled from a golden throne and held countless lives in my hands. Now I beseech others for an audience. I'm sure the change in my circumstances amuses you. No. In my own way, I am striking back against the Iconians. I will succeed. The whole will shatter, and I will be there to see it.
So, Sailor, presumably trying not to strangle, stab, vaporize, poison, or otherwise murder Klingon bureaucrats. It's good to see the Klingons embracing modern warfare. Although I have to note that the last Emperor to rule from a Golden Throne, well, that hasn't gone too well for him. The whole is presumably, of course, the term for the Iconian Empire. Good to have a name for them, even if it's something more polite than that bunch of stinking... Aside from that, there's not a lot to add, really. She's trying to get an audience with the Klingon High Council, most of whom would quite happily gut her and remove her head from her shoulders, not necessarily in that order. And, well, she's not having much luck, is she? Oh well, maybe that'll change come episode 5, but somehow I doubt it. Most of them just want to see her dead. So under the circumstances, getting stalled by the bureaucracy is probably the Klingons' version of a polite go away. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I've been yours, or that has been a look at Tier 4 of the Iconian rep. And until next time, farewell.